the Dallas Cowboys just made a move that could completely change how we think about their draft strategy, and it happened while most of us were sleeping. So before we dive in, hit that subscribe button right now because we're covering every single Cowboys transaction the second it drops, and you need to be here for all of it, because this signing is way more interesting than it looks on the surface. Cobie Durant is officially a Dallas Cowboy on a 1-year, $5.5 million deal coming over from the Los Angeles Rams. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. Another depth piece, another mid-tier free agent, same old Dallas playing it safe. But here's what nobody's talking about. This isn't just about adding a corner with starting experience, even though that's huge. This could be a signal that the front office is finally willing to break their own rules when it comes to the type of players they target in the secondary, and that matters way more than you think, especially with the draft 3 weeks away. Let me break down who Cobie Durant actually is, because if you're not familiar with him, you need to understand what Dallas is getting here. Durant was a 4th-round pick by the Rams back in 2022 out of South Carolina State, and he's worked his way up from being a backup to a part-time starter to logging nearly 1,000 snaps last season. He racked up 19 starts over the past 2 years, which means he's not some project or special teams guy. He's played real meaningful football in a Sean McVay defense that knows how to use defensive backs. Last season alone, he put up 40 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 7 pass breakups. And here's the kicker. He led the Rams in interceptions with 3 picks. And over his career, he's already got 7 interceptions total, which shows he's got ball skills and instincts. His nickname is Land Shark, which is just an elite name, by the way. And when you watch his highlights, you'll see why. He's got a nose for the football, and he can make some absolutely spectacular plays on the ball. But let's keep it real, because this isn't all sunshine. Durant is a streaky player, and that's putting it nicely. One game he'll jump a route and take it to the house or break up a crucial 3rd down, and the next game you're watching him get burned on a double move, wondering what he was thinking. He gave up 3 touchdowns during the Rams playoff run, which isn't ideal. And while he's not a liability as a tackler, he's definitely not someone you're counting on to come up and stone a running back in the hole. He's predominantly an outside corner, and that's where he's played most of his snaps, both in college and in the pros. So Dallas is adding a guy who knows that role and has real game experience in it. Now, here's why I think this move is actually bigger than just adding a veteran corner for depth. Cobie Durant does not fit the Cowboys' historical profile at all, and that's what makes this fascinating. Dallas has always and I mean always targeted corners with length, long arms, big wingspans, guys who can mirror receivers and use their reach to disrupt at the catch point. Think about every corner they've drafted or signed over the last decade, and you'll see a pattern. They love those long, athletic prototypes who measure out with 32-inch arms and 76-inch wingspans. But Cobie Durant is the complete opposite of that. He's 5'9" and 180 pounds with just over 30-inch arms and a wingspan of 72 3/4 inches. When he came out in the draft, those measurements put him in the 12th percentile for height among corners, 8th percentile for weight, 11th percentile for wingspan, and 26th percentile for arm length. This dude is small by NFL standards, and the Cowboys have historically stayed away from guys built like this, so why does that matter? Because if they're willing to sign a corner who doesn't fit their traditional mold in free agency, it probably means they're willing to draft one too, and that could completely open up their options at pick 12 or pick 20. Let me paint the picture for you. There are some really talented corners in this draft class who don't have elite length. Guys like Monsur, Delane, who's 6 feet and 187 pounds but only has 30-inch arms. Or Maxwell, Terrell, who's just under 5'11", weighs 186 and has 31-inch arms. In previous years, the Cowboys would probably pass on those guys because they don't check the measurables boxes that Dallas has been obsessed with. But if they just paid $5.5 million to Cobie Durant, who has the same limitations, then maybe they're finally willing to expand their evaluation process and take the best player, regardless of whether he's got a 76-inch wingspan. And the crazy part is this year's corner class doesn't have a ton of length anyway. Even the top guys aren't hitting those traditional Cowboys benchmarks. So if Dallas stayed stubborn about it, they'd be forcing themselves into a tiny pool of prospects. This signing might be them acknowledging that and adjusting their philosophy accordingly, which would be a huge step forward for a front office that has been way too rigid about this stuff in the past. So where does Durant fit on this roster right now? I think in an ideal world, he's your number 4 corner, and that's actually a great role for him. You've got Trevon Bland, who hopefully stays healthy and has a bounce-back season after dealing with injuries. You've got DaRon Bland, who was an absolute stud before he got hurt. You've got Jourdan Lewis, who can play inside, and now you've got Cobie Durant, who can step in and play outside if someone goes down or if you need to rotate. Before this signing, if you lost a starter, you were looking at guys like Traquan Bridges or Kalen Carson or Josh Butler being thrust into major roles, and that's just not a recipe for success. Durant gives you actual insurance with a guy who started games in the NFL and played in big moments. Is he perfect? Absolutely not. Is he better than the other depth options Dallas had? 100% yes. And here's the thing. If the board falls right and Dallas drafts a corner in round 1, whether it's Delane or Terrell or someone else, then Durant becomes your fourth or fifth corner, and you've got legitimate depth at the position for the first time in a while. But if the board doesn't cooperate and they decide to go a different direction at 12 and 20, you're not in full panic mode because you've got Durant who can at least fill in and give you competent snaps, even if he's not a lockdown guy. Now let's talk about what the Rams letting him walk tells us, because that's important context. Los Angeles didn't even try to bring him back, and they moved on from him pretty quickly in free agency, which means they saw his limitations up close and decided to upgrade. The Rams are a well-run organization that knows how to evaluate talent, so the fact that they were fine letting Durant leave should tell you he's got a pretty clear ceiling. He's a depth piece. He's a rotational guy. He's not someone you're building your secondary around, but for $5.5 million on a 1-year deal, Dallas isn't asking him to be that. They're asking him to be exactly what he is, a veteran who can play outside corner and give you solid reps when called upon. And frankly, that's a role the Cowboys desperately needed to fill, because last year when the injuries piled up, the depth was absolutely exposed and it cost them games. Here's where this gets interesting for the salary cap and the overall roster construction. $5.5 million isn't nothing, but it's also not breaking the bank. It's a short-term prove-it deal for Durant and a low-risk move for Dallas. If he works out great, you've got a solid depth corner for cheap. If he doesn't work out, or if he's the same streaky player he was in LA, you move on after 1 year and you're not stuck with dead money. This is actually smart roster building because it gives you flexibility. You're not locked into anything long-term, and you can still be aggressive in the draft. The Cowboys have also been adding a bunch of these mid-tier free agents on 1- and 2-year deals, which tells me they're trying to patch holes without committing major resources. They know they've got some big decisions coming up with their own players, and they're trying to stay flexible while also not going into the season with glaring weaknesses. Is it the sexiest strategy? No. Would I have loved to see them go get a big name corner in free agency? Absolutely. But this is the reality of how Dallas operates, and at least they're being smart about it within their own constraints. Let me ask you this. Would you rather have Cobie Durant as your fourth corner, or would you rather roll into the season with Traquan Bridges and Kalen Carson as your top backups? I think the answer is pretty obvious. Durant has played real snaps in real games, and he's made plays even if he's also had his share of mistakes. The other guys are mostly unknowns or players who've shown they're not ready for significant roles. So while this isn't a move that's going to make headlines or get everyone hyped up, it's a move that actually makes sense and fills a need. And honestly, I'd rather see Dallas make a bunch of these smart depth signings than overpay for a big name who doesn't fit or who's on the decline. The key is they can't stop here. They still need to draft a corner, and they still need to add more talent to this secondary, because even with Durant, the depth isn't where it needs to be if they want to compete for a championship. Now let's talk about what this means for the draft, because that's where this all comes together. With Durant in the fold, the Cowboys have way more flexibility on draft night. They don't have to reach for a corner at 12 if the top guys are gone. They don't have to panic and take someone at 20 just because it's a position of need. They can actually let the board come to them and take the best player available, knowing they've got at least some depth at corner. That doesn't mean they won't draft a corner, because I still think they absolutely should. The top of this class has some really talented players, and if a guy like Delane or Terrell or even someone like Brandon Cece is sitting there at 12, I think Dallas has to seriously consider it, but the pressure is off a little bit, and that's huge because panic picks are how you end up with busts. If they love a corner, they can take him. If they love an edge rusher or a defensive tackle or even an offensive lineman, they can go that direction too. This signing gives them options, and options are valuable in the draft. Here's what I'm watching for over the next few weeks. Does Dallas bring in any of these shorter-armed corners for visits? Do they spend extra time with guys like Delane or Terrell at the Combine or at Pro Days? Because if they do, that would confirm that they're opening up their evaluation process and that this Durant signing wasn't just a one-off. I also want to see if they make any more moves at corner in free agency, because there are still some veterans available. And if they add another one, that would really solidify the depth. And of course, the draft is the big one. If they take a corner in round one, especially one who doesn't fit their traditional measurables, we'll know for sure that something has changed philosophically in Dallas. But if they go back to targeting long-arm guys, then maybe Durant is just an exception and they're sticking with what they know. Either way, this is a storyline worth tracking, because it could have major implications for how this roster is built moving forward. Let's also talk about what this means in the locker room, because adding a veteran who's played in big games and been part of a winning culture like the Rams have is always a positive. Durant knows what it takes to compete at a high level, and he's been in playoff games, which is experience you can't replicate in practice. He's not a rah-rah leader or a big personality from what we know, but he's a professional who's earned his way onto an NFL roster and carved out a role. That kind of presence can help younger guys like Kalen Carson or Josh Butler, or even a rookie if they draft one. Having a vet who can show them the ropes and teach them how to prepare is valuable, even if it doesn't show up on the stat sheet. Plus, competition at practice just got better. The corners room is going to have to battle every day because no one's spot is safe. And that's when you get the best out of players. If everyone's comfortable and knows they're starting, regardless of performance, you get complacent. But when you've got multiple guys fighting for reps, you get intensity and focus, and that raises the level of the entire unit. One thing I haven't seen enough people talk about is how this impacts special teams, because Durant has played on special teams throughout his career, and Dallas desperately needs help there after being one of the worst special teams units in the league last season. Adding guys who can contribute on all three phases is huge, and if Durant can be a gunner on punt coverage or play on kick return, that's added value beyond just his role at corner. The Cowboys have made it clear that special teams is a priority this offseason, and every signing they make you have to look at through that lens. It's not just about defense or offense, it's about what they bring to the entire 53-man roster. So if Durant can help shore up some of those special teams issues while also giving you depth at corner, that's a win-win, and it makes the $5.5 million look even better. Here's my final take on this whole thing. I like the signing. Is Cobie Durant going to transform this defense? No. Is he going to be a Pro Bowler? Probably not, but is he a solid veteran depth piece who fills a need and gives Dallas options? Absolutely. And more importantly, this could signal a shift in how the Cowboys evaluate cornerbacks, which would be a massive development if they're finally willing to look past arm length and wingspan and just take good football players. That opens up their draft board in a major way and could lead to better picks. I've been frustrated for years watching Dallas pass on talented corners because they didn't measure perfectly. And if this signing means that's changing, then I'm all for it. The bottom line is the secondary needed help. They got help. It's not flashy, but it's functional, and sometimes that's exactly what you need. I'd give this signing a solid B. It's not an A because Durant has clear limitations, and $5.5 million is a decent chunk of change for a depth player, but it's also not a C because he's actually played in the league and has a track record. It's a smart move that makes the roster better and gives them flexibility moving forward, and I can't really complain about that. Now, before we wrap up, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, because we're going to be all over the Cowboys draft coverage and every move they make this offseason, and you don't want to miss any of it. Hit that like button too, because it helps us keep bringing you this content every single day. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you like the Cobie Durant signing? Are you excited about what this could mean for the draft? Do you think Dallas should still take a corner at 12, or should they go a different direction? And what grade would you give this move, A, B, C, D, or F? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because I want to hear what Cowboys Nation thinks about this. Let's get a conversation going, and I'll be reading through everything you guys say. This is a big offseason for Dallas, and every move matters, so let's break it all down together. Drop a comment and let me know your take right now.